You would think that the 2024 Dell XPS 14 would be a dream machine for a Mac user that needs to get a Windows laptop. And in some ways, that is true, but in other ways, there are some differences that are hard to get over. And I think if there were a few small changes, one big notable one, this would be the dream machine. Now, I have to say that I really like the design. I actually reviewed the previous version when they launched this styling in the 13-inch, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it raving reviews, but with the 14-inch as well as the 16-inch, which we just got in, we have some major differences. Now, one of my favorite things about this machine is the sleek, modern look. I think it looks more sleek than the MacBooks that we use all the time. And right over here, we have a missing trackpad, but that is because it is actually hidden and built in. And that might make you think that you might have some issues with accuracy or responsiveness, not having it be dedicated and visible, but this thing works so dang well. I could say that it's easily the best Windows laptop trackpad that I have ever used. And the same thing goes with the keys. They look sleek, but even though they are flush with the top, they have a lot of travel, and honestly, they feel better than the MacBooks that I use because of that travel and the larger size. Even though it takes a little bit of getting used to, it feels great once you're used to it. I need to mute this thing. Now, above it, this is where things get a little bit weird. Now I could see how it looks so sleek, and you can hit the function button to access that row of special function keys, or you can have it be vice versa. But it brings me back to Touch Bar MacBook vibes, which most of us were happy that Apple went away from that. Now, in general, if you're looking down and pressing keys, it's not bad to use, but what gets tougher is if you want to use these keys without looking, which I often do, especially the escape key or the delete button. Now, Dell packed in a ton of features and high-end specs into this laptop, and because of that, this particular model cost $2,400. It is expensive. It does have 32 gigs of RAM, and that RAM is now soldered on to the motherboard, which allows it to be really fast, and that wouldn't be possible with RAM that you can change out. And thankfully, the prices aren't ridiculous for RAM upgrades. And with that, the storage is incredibly fast, a lot faster than the competing MacBooks. Another thing I really like is the OLED display. It is very sharp, it looks super nice, but of course it's not dual layer, so it doesn't get as bright as, say, a 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, one thing that you'll never get on a MacBook is a touchscreen. So if you're somebody that likes that, this is a nice benefit, but personally, I'm just not used to using that. But I do absolutely love the Windows Hello and that login where you just open it up and it sees your face. It has the depth sensors and all the little sensors in there, and it logs you in. I wish we had that. And with that, another great thing about Intel and this Dell XPS is that it actually supports 4 displays, even in a model like this. Now, this also has NVIDIA graphics. It's an RTX 4050, and I was hoping that because it's an RTX graphics card, the performance would really surprise me. And it's because it's not some high-end one, we would have the same performance when it's unplugged as when it's plugged in. And I was pleasantly surprised when we saw the differences in Geekbench, where we had no difference in single core, and then in multi-core, it actually got better performance on battery power, which sometimes can be caused just by heat buildup. And that was so awesome to see. And as far as graphics in some of our simple benchmarks, we also didn't have much of a difference at all. But unfortunately, benchmarks don't always tell tell this real story because when we started doing some heavier, longer tasks, that is when the difference started to come in. And that's one thing as a Mac user, even on the highest end M3 Macs, the performance doesn't change. And that's what I love about it. I don't have to feel like I need to go and plug in to get the performance that I am paying for. Now with that, another difference from a Mac user's perspective is the fact that you don't have to go into any settings to adjust the performance modes. Of course, when benchmarks are shown off, it's always plugged in with all the settings turned on maximum performance. But for the average user, especially a MacBook user, when you're buying it, you don't know you have to go find hidden settings. And even for us here as tech reviewers, we have to dig through the Windows settings, the Dell settings, and then the NVIDIA settings to be able to go and adjust those things. And you even have to make an NVIDIA account and log in to get your full performance. And even then, with these chips, you won't get full performance unless you plug in the laptop, and that is a little bit frustrating. Now, we also have to talk about Intel x86 versus Apple Silicon or ARM chips that are coming out like Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite. When we look at these benchmarks, sometimes this machine is beating out the MacBook equivalents and competitors, but when it comes to things like photo editing, video editing, and other tasks, well, the Macs are simply much faster, even though raw benchmarks don't show that. And that is because of all the optimization that is done with those chips and the software that is caught up. You know, it's actually been caught up for a couple of years. And that is why I think the biggest limitation to this beautiful laptop is that Intel chip. Even though they've packed in a ton of cores, they have efficiency cores and they have low power cores, well, you don't get the full performance because it sucks so much power. And in Cinebench, compared to our MacBook Air, well, we're using way more power. I'm talking about above 30 watts on battery compared to 20 peak for the MacBook with the M3 chip. But at the end of that 10-minute test, the MacBook is running at about 10 watts. And our final performance numbers were practically identical. And that is because on battery, this Intel chip is actually optimized to get the best battery to performance ratio. But the MacBooks, for full performance of M3, they're almost in a way overclocked, being pushed really hard to get a bit more performance and better benchmarks to compare with systems. But the real true best performance ratio is when it actually throttles. It goes down to 10 watts, which is half the power, but the performance doesn't really drop that much. And because of this, we have a major difference in battery life. Now, this thing has the high resolution OLED, which sucks a lot of power. And because of that, after all of our benchmarks and comparisons, well, the Dell was close to dying, whereas the MacBook was above 50% while doing things faster. And that's one thing as a Mac user in the last couple of years, we've gotten used to battery life numbers that are absolutely incredible while having excellent performance. And that is why I am super excited for Qualcomm's chips, and Dell is working with Qualcomm to put some of those chips in here, because at that point, we're gonna have a much more even experience as far as throttling and battery life as you would get on a MacBook, but on a Windows machine that has Windows with a lot more different applications and especially games, as long as everything works well, where the Macs aren't very good for gaming at all because the libraries are extremely small. And with that, that is also going to help with fan noise, because Qualcomm's chips are going to be able to be run fanless at lower wattages, just like the MacBook Air. And even at the full 23 watts, which is the optimum for that chip, well, the fans are going to be a lot quieter than what we have on this machine in full performance modes. So that is why I am really excited for that. But at this point, even though this is a great machine and it has a lot of standout features, well, they are limited by Intel even still. Now, there's a couple things that I would love for them to tweak. I would love to get regular keys back at the top, and on the side we have a micro SD card reader. Personally, I would really prefer to have a full size because it's easy to get a little adapter and adapt to micro SD so you can do both. And the speakers, we have a speaker comparison as well, and even though they get loud, they don't get really deep as far as bass. And of course, the price tag. Even though we as Apple users are used to spending a lot of money on laptops, when you factor in trying to pack in a screen like this and all of the other features, including paying NVIDIA for the graphics, paying Intel for their chips, the price is pretty dang expensive. So overall, even though this thing is super sleek, I like the design, as a Mac user, there's not really a big reason to want to buy one of these machines because the price tag and some of those features that I talked about. You guys let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Click that circle above to subscribe. Check out one of those videos right over there. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next one.